It's 8 o'clock. This is the UK Tonight. A brutal business. Humza Yousaf resigns as Scotland's First Minister, throwing the country into political turmoil. Well, it's just days since Mr Yousaf said he was going nowhere, but faced with 2 no-confidence votes, he admitted today he'd underestimated the upset caused by ending a power-sharing deal with the Greens. We'll have the latest for you live from Edinburgh. Also tonight, we'll hear from a father suing AstraZeneca after he claims he suffered a rare side effect from its COVID vaccine. Jamie Scott suffered a brain injury just days after having the jab and is now unable to work. He says the pharmaceutical giant downplayed the vaccine's risks, a claim AstraZeneca denies. Plus, Premier League clubs agree in principle to a cap on overall squad salaries. So what will it mean for the game? We'll have the latest from our sports correspondent, Rob Harris. And the ancient bluebell woods now covered in heaps of illegal waste. We'll hear from one of the campaigners who has written to the Secretary of State calling for action. All that's come and much more on the UK Tonight. Scotland was thrown into political chaos today as Humza Yousaf, the First Minister, resigned. He's been fighting to save his political career after ending a power-sharing deal with the Scottish Greens just last week, leaving him facing 2 votes of no confidence. Well, in a statement, Mr Yousaf said that he'd made this decision after reflecting on what was best for his party and for Scotland. Our Scotland correspondent Conor Gillis has our first report this evening.
His face said it all.
I have therefore informed the SNP's National Secretary of my intention to stand down as party leader.
A First Minister engulfed in crisis after sacking the Greens from his government.
Unfortunately, in ending the Butte House Agreement in the manner that I did, I clearly underestimated the level of hurt and upset that caused Green colleagues. For a minority government to be able to govern effectively and efficiently, trust when working with the opposition is clearly fundamental.
Outside, a stunned silence as the chaos unfolded.
To my wonderful wife, my beautiful children, and my wider family for putting up with me over the years, I'm afraid you will be seeing a lot more of me from now. And who could ask for a better country to lead than Scotland? Thank you very much.
First Minister, you make a famous calculation. Have you left the party in a worse state?
A leader who arguably sabotaged himself after burning bridges in a week of high drama.
Will you resign if you lose this week?
Again, I'm not planning to, of course, lose the vote of no confidence. I'm planning to win that vote of no confidence.
Defiant in this, his last public appearance just 2 days ago, speaking exclusively to Sky News. Facing the prospect of relying on Alex Salmond's Alba party in that vote, his support would have come at a cost. The day began with Humza Yousaf's closest advisers here in Edinburgh telling me that cowing to Alex Salmond's demands would be like doing a deal with the devil. And there were real fears within the SNP of them becoming a puppet of their bitter rival. It simply was not going to happen.
I do feel for Humza today. I mean, I've been there. I've done a resignation speech as First Minister. And whether you're First Minister or Prime Minister, most people, when they aspire in politics to get the top job, and therefore, despite all the trials, tribulations, frustrations, and everything else that goes on, it's a great wrench when you leave it.
The immediate future of the SNP could now lie in his hands.
Catherine.
Sturgeon and Yousaf ally John Swinney preparing to steady the ship.
I'm giving very careful consideration to standing to be the leader of the SNP. I've been somewhat overwhelmed by the requests that have been made of me to do that, with many, many messages from many colleagues across the party. So I'm giving that issue very active consideration.
Those close to Kate Forbes say she is also considering a bid, while others with leadership ambitions step aside.
Serious times demand serious politics and serious people, and the best person to take that forward now for the Scottish National Party is John Swinney, to be able to provide that stability that the public are crying out for.
As the continuing police probe examining SNP finances threatens to further political damage in this election year, opponents sense opportunity.
What is happening now with the SNP
is that the mask is slipping. People in Scotland are realising that public services are worse, educational standards are falling, there's a crisis in the NHS.
I despair at the situation in Scotland. It's absolute chaos now from the Scottish Parliament, from the SNP. So you've got chaos in the Scottish Parliament, you've got chaos in the Westminster Parliament, and you know, the Scottish people are being fundamentally let down.
He may have run out of road, the political miscalculation that proved fatal. The next one will have to pick up the pieces and deal with the electoral consequences. Conor Gillis, Sky News in Edinburgh.
Oh, let's get more on this story and join our political correspondent Darren McCaffrey, who is in Edinburgh for us this evening. And Darren, the SNP in a right old mess. As we heard Conor saying there, they're going to have to try and pick up the pieces. How exactly are they going to do that?
Well, this is the big question facing the party, isn't it? Not just that they have to go to decide who the new leader is going to be, but what leader is that direction potentially going to take the party in? Just in terms of the leadership itself, we know that the SNP's kind of big board, if you like, the meeting of the hierarchy of the party is going to take place later on this week, and they're going to set out how quickly this leader might be put in place. Maybe even if there's going to be a contest at all, because while names are being bandied around like John Sweeney, a well-established, well-liked figure within the SNP is a possibility. Claire Forbes, who actually stood against Humza Yousaf last time, is also in the frame, someone who got 48% of the vote. But there are big questions about whether we will see a contest at all. Many in the party would like to see that, others wouldn't, given the divisions and given the fact that this would be a new SNP leader, just over a year after the last one won a pretty bruising campaign. And that's the big thing that I've gotten from today, Sarah-Jane, more than anything, are the deep divisions within the SNP. We saw that play out in the last leadership contest. I suspect we could see it play out again in the weeks to come. This is a party that is divided not just on big issues, social issues such as the gender issues or the green agenda, but also on the independence movement and how the SNP can best achieve that. And that's going to be a big fundamental problem, I think, for the SNP going forward. They've been in power for 17 years. A lot of people here are quite tired, frankly, and they are looking for other parties. And the key winners in all of this, of course, could be Labour. And if Labour start winning again in Scotland substantially, that could help Keir Starmer win potentially big at Westminster if the current polls are to be believed.
OK, Darren, thank you. Darren McCaffrey there with the latest for us from Edinburgh. And Humza Yousaf's resignation, of course, sure to feature in tomorrow's newspapers. Our extended press preview and news review coming up, as ever, 10:30 tonight with tonight's news and tomorrow's headlines. Joining us in the studio, Pippa Crerar, political editor of The Guardian, and Ryan Saby, political editor of The Sun. Now, a father who suffered a brain injury just days after receiving a British-developed COVID vaccine has told Sky News he would never have had the jab if he had known of the risk of a rare but serious side effect. Jamie Scott is suing AstraZeneca for what he claims is damage caused by the vaccine back in April 2021. AstraZeneca denies his claims that the pharmaceutical giant exaggerated the vaccine's effectiveness and downplayed its risks. Our science correspondent Thomas Moore joins me now in the studio. Thomas, this is really interesting in terms of the COVID vaccine a number of years on and you know, people talking about side effects. What has Jamie Scott had to say?
Yeah, look, go back 3 years, at that really exciting spring when the vaccine was being rolled out. This was our ticket out of lockdown, back to normal. And we all took the invitation, queued up, got a jab, and for most people it turned out fine. And it did see us out of the pandemic. But for some people, it didn't work out so well. And Jamie says that he is one of them, that he had a reaction to the vaccine which resulted in blood clots. And that is at the centre of this legal action that he is taking against the manufacturers of the jab, AstraZeneca. It is a really hard story. He's in a very difficult position himself, but he is hoping that there can be some redress because he and his wife are not seeking the limelight. They are a couple that want to have their privacy and protect their families, but this is their recourse and this is their story. Jamie Scott's perfectly constructed world collapsed 10 days after having the AstraZeneca COVID jab. He had a loving wife, 2 young boys and a well-paid job. But now he struggles with everyday life, brain damaged as a result, he believes, of blood clotting caused by the vaccine, a rare side effect he was unaware of. He's taking the pharmaceutical giant to court, claiming the vaccine was defective.
I took it to protect the elderly people around me, but I think AstraZeneca and the government need to explain the risk whenever you take medicine, I think, because if there's a risk, if I've got a young family, that I would never have taken it.
10 days after having his first dose of the vaccine in April 2021, Jamie woke up with a severe headache, started vomiting and had trouble speaking. He was rushed to hospital, where he was diagnosed with a clot that was stopping blood draining from his brain, as well as a hemorrhage in the brain itself.
They told me he wouldn't wake up. They told me if he did wake up, he would never be the same. We often, especially to our parents when we talk about it, feel like the luckiest unlucky people. We know we were unlucky that it happened to us. We're very lucky that Jamie survived, but our lives are so drastically different.
He hasn't worked since, but under the government's vaccine damage payment scheme, he was given the maximum £120,000, well short of his expected lifetime earnings.
If Jamie was in a car crash, there would have been insurance to cover the injuries and the loss of income that he's experienced. Fair compensation, like I said, I do not think we should have to lose our house. There has to be protection for those people who did the right thing when the government said it was safe and effective, time and time again.
51 cases have been lodged in the High Court with victims and grieving relatives claiming damage from the vaccine. Their lawyer says that by mid-March of 2021, other European countries were suspending or withdrawing use of the jab because of the link with clotting. The UK only advised against its use in younger people.
This was very much seen and presented by Boris Johnson and his government at that time as a triumph. And let's remember, there were awful days. The AstraZeneca vaccine was helpful for very many people. We're not disputing that. But I think the extent to which it was politics driving the decision and the extent to which it was clinical decision makers driving the decision is yet to be fully resolved.
The AstraZeneca vaccine is still licensed but not used in the UK. It is in many other countries and is estimated to have saved 6 million lives in its first year. The Department of Health said it doesn't comment on ongoing litigation or specific cases. AstraZeneca says it updated product information for the vaccine in April 2021 to reflect the possibility in very rare cases of blood clots. A spokesperson added the AstraZeneca Oxford vaccine has continuously been shown to have an acceptable safety profile, and regulators around the world consistently state that the benefits of vaccination outweigh the risks of extremely rare potential side effects. Jamie and Kate feel they've been left out in the cold. He did what he felt was his duty by having the jab, but without the safety net to replace lost income, he would think twice next time.
It's great to be alive, and I do enjoy that with the boys, and that's what I do enjoy. That is Kate and the boys and family, and I think I'm just happy to be alive. But it is a shadow, and every day is just difficult.
So AstraZeneca will strongly defend the vaccine at the High Court should the case reach that far and that it's not settled before then. But Kate and Jamie say they didn't want to litigate. It is their only option. And the point is this vaccine damage payment scheme, which was set up in 1979. Vaccination is like a social pact, isn't it? We protect each other by all coming forward for the jab. But the argument of Jamie and Kate is that, well, people just aren't going to do that to the same degree if that safety net isn't there. And that's what they're really fighting for, so that people who are sadly damaged by vaccines of any kind, that there is some help for them there.
OK, well, those 51 cases going to court, they'll be closely watched. Thomas, thank you, Thomas Moore, our science correspondent there with that exclusive interview. Well, if you were watching Thomas's report and you're concerned by that story, let's put it into a bit of context for you. Thomas did some of that for us. Let's get some more with GP Dr Nikita Kanani, who joins me now. She's also the former medical director of primary care for NHS England. Dr. Kanani, really good to see you here on the UK Tonight. As pointed out in Thomas's report there, the AstraZeneca COVID vaccine was helpful for so many people, but 51 cases have now been lodged in the High Court, with victims and grieving relatives seeking damages estimated to be worth up to £100 million. Families are concerned, but the key word here is that these serious side effects are rare.
Yeah, absolutely. Good evening, Sarah-Jane, and thanks for having me. First of all, the story that we just heard, Jamie and his family, I mean, what a truly difficult time that they've had, and the other complainants. I mean, it's a really challenging space to be in when, as we heard on the programme, you're asked to take a vaccination to protect yourself and to protect your loved ones. But that is very much where we were. If we can take ourselves back to the end of December 2020 and the beginning of 2021, we were still very much locked down in our own homes with no real possibility of getting back to doing the things that we loved as families, as communities, in the workplace. So, importantly, vaccines did offer us hope, and they continue to offer us hope. Our ability to get people vaccinated as quickly and as safely as possible meant that the country could reopen. It meant that we could get back to seeing people that we loved in a way that many of us had missed. But equally, as Thomas mentioned, the ability for vaccination to offer a sort of social pact or social contract is important. Trust in vaccines is incredibly important, and these side effects are very rare, as you say. So there's an important message here. Continuing to get vaccinated when asked to do so is important, but learning from vaccinations and vaccination programs is also critically important too.
It's about finding a causal link, isn't it? And of course, this is an ongoing court case. Jamie Scott is claiming that the vaccine gave him these side effects. That hasn't been proven. AstraZeneca are strongly denying. But how easy is it to find a causal link in a vaccine for an extreme side effect? Because, is the risk any greater with a COVID vaccine than it is any other vaccine you may take for an illness or a disease?
It's a really good question, Sarah-Jane. I mean, all vaccine, and in fact, all therapies are monitored very closely. There's a yellow card system in this country where if somebody does get a potential side effect from a medication or a vaccination or really any other intervention, the clinician fills out a form and those side effects are followed up, and that data is then looked into and researched. Obviously, some of the COVID vaccinations are newer in the sense that they were newer to the population. But there was a huge amount of research done and testing done before the vaccinations were rolled out. So what we have to do now is to make sure that we really do learn from these incidents, understand what's been happening, and make sure it informs how we roll out programmes in the future as well.
So what would you say to families who are concerned watching Thomas's report this evening?
I think, first of all, we've seen that the very vast majority of vaccinations have been truly incredibly well received. This was the reason that we're back to doing the things that we love in a way that I don't think many of us imagined in 2020. So the vast majority of vaccinations are completely safe, and if you're being called forward for a vaccination, no matter what age you are, what stage of life, please do come forward. You can always speak to a healthcare professional if you're worried, but the most important thing is to maintain our immunity. And that goes for many of the vaccinations that we have and that we do for our children when they're growing up as well. We saw a peak in the number of children having measles and mumps last year. We don't want to see that again. So it's really important that vaccinations are taken up when they're offered.
OK, Dr Nikita Kanani, really good to see you again on the UK Tonight. Thank you for your time. Well, we do have a statement from AstraZeneca which says our sympathy goes out to anyone who has lost loved ones or reported health problems. Patient safety is our highest priority, and regulatory authorities have clear and stringent standards to ensure the safe use of all medicines, including vaccines. From the body of evidence in clinical trials and real-world data, the AstraZeneca Oxford vaccine has continuously been shown to have an acceptable safety profile, and regulators around the world consistently state that the benefits of vaccination outweigh the risks of extremely rare potential side effects. Still to come here on the UK Tonight. Premier League clubs vote in favour of plans for a spending cap. We'll explore what that will mean with our sports correspondent. Also ahead, The Kent woodland blighted by tons of illegal landfill on a site of special scientific interest. And defying the sands of time, we'll speak to the 76-year-old who has become the oldest Brit to run the gruelling Marathon des Sables in the Sahara Desert.
I'm Stuart Ramsey, and I'm Sky's chief correspondent.
Well, there's a real sense now that people are beginning to expect that this whole airlift is coming to an end, and they're really, really desperate. We saw snatch squads going in, grabbing people and putting them into trucks.
You either live and recover, or you die.
Okay, so that's like a war.
That's the war, yes.
We help you understand the world with us.
Over the past 24 hours, the soldiers have been attacked on a number of occasions. It's really sending a clear message that Venezuela is eager for change. We've been crushed.
To take you to the heart of stories that shape our world.
They were convinced the United States would become hooked. Well, they were right.
An enormous explosion has just come down. I think it was a monster that's just landed in between us.
The information on this could bring down the entire network, not just in Iraq and Syria, but across the world.
It's not out of control, but here's withdrawn. It's so hot.
Hello, welcome back to the UK Tonight. Now, Premier League clubs have voted in favour of plans to introduce a spending cap to the top flight. The proposed new rules, which are still to be agreed, would anchor the maximum limit based on a multiple of how much the lowest earning club took from TV revenue and prize money. Well, let's get more details with our sports correspondent, Rob Harris. In other words, Rob, make sense of it all for us, because it's quite complicated. There's a lot of big, perhaps smaller numbers involved. First of all, explain why this matters.
Well, the question is, do we want football clubs to be able to spend as they wish? Some are very wealthy, so that would enable them to attract the biggest name players to come and play, say, in the Premier League. But then that can distort the competition, so that puts them at an unfair advantage and doesn't create something anywhere close to a level playing field. So you wouldn't get a competitive Premier League, which then ultimately would affect the TV income from places like this, from Sky and from parent company Comcast as the big rights holders that fund all these Premier League clubs. So they have regulations to try to ensure financial sustainability and a competitiveness, but some of those rules that have been in place already have angered the clubs because it's led to things like points deductions.
Yeah. It's a complicated thing to get right and a fine line to tread, isn't it, trying to get the balance? What's it going to mean for clubs? Because obviously the big clubs, they've got the big players who command the big money. It'll clip their wings slightly. What's it going to mean overall for clubs, do you think?
Well, currently in the Premier League, clubs can lose £105 million over 3 years. Sounds like big numbers. Many can cushion that alone.
It's not that much in Premier League terms, though, is it?
No, and what the new rules won't be about the losses you can make, but about how much you can spend. So there are new restrictions coming in partly from Europe that are going to be aligned with the Premier League. So you can spend 70% of your revenue, if you're in Europe, on player wages and transfers. If you're not in Europe, you can spend 85% of that. But say you earned £1 billion in revenue, well, you can spend a lot then, which means the Premier League wants to restrict even how much of that you can spend, which is why they're bringing in anchoring. So formula's being worked out, but here's one hypothetical one. You could only spend 5 times the amount earned by the bottom place club from the Premier League in TV and prize money. So take last season, Southampton earned about £100 million in the Premier League. It means the maximum any club in the Premier League could spend would be £500 million in that regard. As it stands now, the rules have been agreed in principle, as I understand it, for a meeting today by the Premier League clubs. 4 did not back it, so only 16 vote in favour. That's enough to progress it to the annual general meeting now in June, when they'll finalise, it's suspected, the rules, the regulations and all the precise numbers.
Do we know who those 4 were?
We do. I'm told the Manchester clubs, United and City, voted against. Also, Aston Villa voted against, I understand, and Chelsea abstained. That's information I gained from inside the meeting.
OK, Rob, thank you. Rob Harris with the latest on that. We'll follow that, but the next meeting in June. OK, Rob Harris, our sports correspondent, thank you. Now, campaigners in Kent are calling on the Environment Agency to take action. This is after thousands of tonnes of waste was dumped in an ancient bluebell woodland. Hodeswood is a designated site of special scientific interest, but locals say it's been turned into a desolate wasteland, with reports of up to 30 trucks a day dumping illegal waste from July last year. Sky's Rachel Venables has the story.
The road to an environmental catastrophe, paved by 27,000 tonnes of processed waste, smothering the landscape and destroying the bluebell woodland.
And you'll see things like a kid's Spider-Man mask. You'll see like a toy car and ping pong balls, a jet black puddle, toxic water, if you will.
Francis is a local resident who's too worried about the people behind this to appear on camera.
Big 12-wheeler grab lorries were coming 20, 30 a day to the site, perhaps carrying 20 tonnes apiece. And this went on literally from end of July all the way through August, September, October, November, December, January.
To make things worse, the land is meant to be a protected site of scientific interest.
Stood here, I am overwhelmed by the smell, the reek of rotting eggs, which is the sulphur being pumped into the air by these mounds of rotting waste and rubbish that has been systematically dumped in this once beautiful woodland over the space of many months. Campaigners say it'll cost millions of pounds to clear up.
Now, bluebells are a sign of ancient woodland, could be 600, 700, 1,000 years old. That habitat has been destroyed. And actually to get it back to where it was is hundreds of years of nature doing the job.
The Environment Agency says there's no space for waste crime and they're investigating what's happened. But local residents are worried for their own health, their quality of life and the destruction of a once beloved local environment. Rachel Venables, Sky News in Kent.
Well, let's speak to the area manager for Kent Wildlife Trust. He is Ian Rickards and he joins us on the UK Tonight now. Ian, thank you so much for joining us. My first thought when I read this story was how sad. And then I actually felt really angry. And listening to residents there, you can understand why, because it's not just the impact on this gorgeous, important scientific piece of land, but it's the impact on local life and the residents as well.
I think most people are going for that same range of emotions, from some sadness, from frustration to anger. It's, you know, you go to the site and it's just sort of takes your breath away in more ways than one. And then you just go for this feeling of just anger that it's got to this stage.
In terms of waste crime, you know, how seriously has this been taken? I know you've written to the Secretary of State to try and get something done about this. But, you know, this has been going on for a number of years now. What kind of response have local residents got? Because fly tipping is illegal.
It's been reported over and over again with almost no response from the authorities each time. The Environment Agency have assured us that they're investigating and they're continuing to investigate. But at the moment, no action's been taken. There's been no action taken on removing any of this waste from the woodland. We're just waiting to see what's going to happen. We're trying our best to push pressure on the Secretary of State, seeing he's the one with the purse strings that's got to decide who's going to pay for this work. But at the moment, we're still waiting.
Well, Ian, I'm just looking at pictures on the screen now, which hopefully you can see as well.
Yeah.
You'll have seen them before. They're from the Trust. What we should be looking at there is, you know, bluebells as far as the eye can see. What we're looking at now is wasteland. Can this land ever be brought back to life, as it were, do you think?
It will never be. It'll never be the same as what it was. It's basically what was there has been destroyed completely. There's no way of restoring that to anything like what was there before. It's going to be a case of if the authorities will remove this material, then we get a bare bit of toxic ground, effectively, which somehow has to be cleaned up further before potentially some tree planting and things goes on. But in terms of ancient woodland, as one of the reports earlier, ancient woodland's taken 1,000 years to get to that stage. It's going to take that long to get it back to that stage. It's not something that's ever going to be replaced.
Oh, Ian, I mean, this is a big problem and it needs a big response, because what we're hearing about, it's not just casual fly tippers. This sounds serious and organised.
The estimate is around 27,000 tonnes of waste gone into there, which is around 1,100 lorries. This is big 8-wheeler lorries, big, huge. This isn't tyres and mattresses.
This isn't in the dead of night, is it? People
no.
getting rid of household waste.
No, it's convoys of lorries driving in and out on a daily basis for weeks, if not months. It's extraordinary. It's got to this stage, and that the authorities did nothing to stop it.
The response from the police and the government has so far been unhelpful, non-existent. How would you describe it?
It's one of those things that there were so many different people that should have been involved with this woodland that nobody took responsibility for it. It was always someone else's job. It's some other agency that was responsible for it. If it was the police or the Environment Agency or Forestry Commission or Natural England, and they got their hands tied up and nothing happened at all.
Oh, well, look, Ian, this is, a really awful story, and please keep us updated in what response you get from the Secretary of State, because, as you said, all of those lorries in an organised fashion dumping onto an ancient woodland and nobody being held responsible and none of this being followed up.
I'm hoping we're going to see some action on this sooner rather than later.
All right, Ian, keep us updated. Ian Rickard's there, Area Manager for Kent Wildlife Trust, talking about the Hodes Wood, the ancient bluebell woodland that's been turned into a desolate wasteland. Still to come here on the UK Tonight. As MPs debate assisted dying in Westminster, I'm going to speak to the actress and campaigner Susan Hampshire about why she is calling for a change in the law. Welcome back to the UK Tonight. Now, MPs have been debating assisted dying in Parliament today. This is after a petition backed by Dame Esther Rantzen gathered more than 200,000 signatures. The Childline founder and broadcaster has joined the assisted dying clinic Dignitas in Switzerland. Says under current UK law, her family could be left at risk of prosecution if they help her to travel there. Well, there have been protests outside Parliament from groups supporting both sides of this debate. Speaking to Sky News earlier, Dame Esther told us people's attitudes towards assisted dying had changed, and it's time the law did too.
When somebody is at the last stages of an illness and finding it unendurable and in agony and asking for someone to help them die, that it is allowed. At the moment, it's a criminal offence in this country, so that even if I decide, which I have signed up to do, which is to go to Switzerland, to go to Dignitas, my family can't go with me to say goodbye because they would run the risk of being accused of manslaughter or maybe murder.
Well, let's speak now to actress turned carer and campaigner Susan Hampshire, who joins us on the show now. She's also a patron for dignity in dying. Susan, thank you so much for speaking to us on the programme tonight. I know that this is particularly personal for you because this affected not just your husband, but two sisters as well. Perhaps you could give us an insight into why their experiences pushed you into having this point of view.
I have believed in this point of view way for many, many, many years, but it's taken Dame Esther Rantzen to bring it to light and everybody to be talking about it. And it's such an important subject because people should have a choice about the end of their life. I'll talk about my two sisters. They were they're 11 and 12 years older than me. And my sister Anne had the most horrendous 5 weeks of horrendous last 5 weeks of her life. She was in great, great pain, and she kept saying to me, please help me, because all she wanted was to be able to be released from the agony that she was in. And she kept saying, I'm not going to get any better. And we were not allowed to do anything. All we had to do is comfort her and watch a sweet, sweet woman go through the most dreadful agony minute by minute, and that is so cruel. My sister Jane also spoke about this, but she said, well, just please let them give me a pill. And in the end, actually, she just stopped eating so that she got to the end. But, you know, people want to be able to die with their loved ones around them, life to be taken away. And if they know they're not going to get better and they've only got a few weeks to live, why make them suffer? I find that people haven't got a choice is really so cruel. It's just cruel. You wouldn't, I mean, let's face it, cats, dogs, if they're suffering, you're humane and you care for them and you make sure that they can be quietly put to sleep. But for humans who are begging not to have to suffer any longer, nothing can be done.
Dame Esther Rantzen made the same. Yeah, Dame Esther Rantzen made the same point today. You know, she said it's frightfully British, isn't it? That, you know, we look after our pets and make sure they're comfortable at the end. But when it comes to human beings, it's the art of suffering almost. And it's interesting, isn't it? Because a lot of people say, look, more needs to go into palliative care. But from what I understand, both of your sisters had palliative care at the end, and yet they still suffered. And having spoken to Dame Prue on this show, she said that people have this idea of almost like a movie ending to their life and slipping away quietly. But it isn't like that for most people. Most people suffer when they die, regardless of whether they had palliative care or not.
I can't speak for other people, but I certainly watched both my sisters have the most appalling last weeks of their life, which was quite unnecessary. And you have to be well off to go to Switzerland. So there's one rule for the rich and one for the poor. And that doesn't seem fair either, does it?
There will be people that say that for this to come, for the law to change in this country, it will require a huge shift in services, because we're not just talking about, you know, the responsibility for this being handed over to the medical profession. You would have to have a legal framework to protect people. There would need to be a social care aspect. There would need to be mental health services involved as well. So it's a huge shift in provision of services for this to be allowed in the UK in a safe way.
So sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, so rude. But if they've managed to do it in Canada, in various states in America, in Belgium, in Switzerland, in other countries, you know, surely we are a civilized country, we can do it as well. And it's about choice. And I don't want to offend anybody who has very deep religious beliefs or people for other reasons don't think that this is right. But for the people who do want it, surely they should be allowed to slip away without pain and with their family around them. And not
because the flip side of the coin to this is you could choose not to. You could choose not to have assistance to die.
You can say, no, I don't want to do it. Exactly. Yes, you have a choice. I don't know.
What would it look like to you in this country? If
they should discuss it in Parliament, shouldn't they? Sorry.
Yeah. No, there's no legislation being put forward at the moment to debate. There's no vote on it. It was a debate to start the conversation, because this conversation needs to be had in the public domain as well as the political one. But what would it look like to you if the law were to change? For example, if a member of your family or you yourself were to go through this, what would you want the framework to look like so that you would be safe, so that people could be sure that you weren't being lent on? Because the argument can be that people will feel that they're a burden and they feel like they have to do this to save their loved ones from suffering, or, you know, there could be more foul play measures at stake here. Do you see what I mean? What would the framework look like to you to make sure people are safe in this?
In other countries, there have not been any legal cases because people have been pressurised or whatever. And I personally, I just think they should at least discuss it in Parliament, if nothing else. It just seems crazy that we're so behind the times, this country, even Australia, you know, everywhere is accepting the fact that we have to have a choice at the end of our life, the last weeks of our life, if we're in agony and can't stand it anymore. And you would have to have 2 doctors, and I think there's a legal person as well that have to sign things off. It's not just a relative saying, oh, let's get rid of her and give her some potion or something and then she's dead. No, it's a very, very precise and detailed format that has to go through for somebody to be able to be released from life when they're in agony.
Susan Hampshire, really good of you to talk to us on the programme tonight. Thank you so much for talking to us particularly about your own personal experience with members of your family. We really appreciate that. As Susan Hampshire, their actress turned carer and campaigner for change in the legislation to assist a dying patron for dignity in dying. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Let's bring you some breaking news now. And the Duchess of Edinburgh is visiting Ukraine to demonstrate solidarity with those impacted by the war, and as part of her work championing survivors of conflict-related sexual violence. The Duchess of Edinburgh is the first member of the royal family to visit Ukraine since this war began. Well, let's bring in our royal correspondent, Laura Bundock, who's with me in the studio. Laura, what can you tell us about this visit?
It's a really significant moment. She is obviously a senior working royal, but, you know, we've not had a member of the royal family visit Ukraine since the Russian invasion. A lot of the senior royals have spoken out in support of Ukraine, but today we've seen Sophie, Duchess of Edinburgh, visiting, and not just anywhere in Ukraine, but visiting Kyiv. She's been to Kyiv and she's also been to Bucha and visited a memorial there where huge numbers of Ukrainian civilians were murdered. The sort of theme around this visit is a cause that's really close to her. She works a lot with victims of conflict. So she's travelled the world visiting various countries. We don't often hear about these international trips she makes, but the likes of Colombia, Sierra Leone, South Sudan, all places she's been to. And we know that Ukraine's been on the list as somewhere she wanted to visit. She gave a speech a little earlier today and spoke about how, it was a good day because she'd finally made it there. But also spoke about some of the things that she'd learned following that visit. Let's have a listen to her now.
So today has been a happy day that I have finally been able to get to Ukraine, and I'm very happy to be here on my first visit. A sad day, because of course it means while I'm here I've been learning more about the situation in all its realities, which of course is sad. The human cost of war is very real, and I know that everybody here feels it very intensely.
So a surprise visit for us, but of course this will have been long in the planning because it's, you know, the Duchess of Edinburgh going into a war zone. What more details do we know about the visit? How long will she be spending there? Who will she be meeting?
She's in and out in a day, basically. Okay. So, but she saw a lot. You know, she met children who were, you know, torn apart, taken away from their families, now reunited, but she heard some of their stories. She met women and girls who were the victims of sexual violence and torture following the conflict. She said the stories that she was hearing from them, stories she's heard around the world, but she talked about how, you know, how brave they were and how humble she was in the fact they shared their stories. And she met volunteers, female volunteers, who were staying in their communities to help in the aftermath of attacks and also to help the children that remain there deal with it as well. And she spoke about the privilege it was, how she would take these stories home in my heart, she said. It was a really personal speech she gave there. It looked pretty off the cuff as well. We know that later on she met President Zelensky, the First Lady as well, who she's had a lot of dealings with in the past, you know, looking at how they're helping support people in Ukraine. But she hand-delivered a letter written by the King to the President as well. And the King, you know, has spoken out a lot strongly in support of Ukraine. It was last February that he had the visit at Buckingham Palace. It was in February this year that the Queen hosted Elena Zelenska at Clarence House. And the King, you know, most recently on the 2nd anniversary used that strong language talking about this, the unprovoked attack, the indescribable aggression that is being faced by Ukraine. So, you know, the royals can't meddle in international politics, but this was a real diplomatic display and a sign, I think, of Sophie's role and seniority within the family at the moment.
OK, Laura, thank you. Laura Bundock there with the breaking news of the Duchess of Edinburgh visiting Ukraine. Thank you, Laura. Now, I just want to bring you an update on a story that we were talking about last week. We've got an update on the condition of the military horses that ran loose through central London. This is coming from the British Army. One of the two horses, Quaker, the cavalry black seen in that last picture there, is expected to make a full recovery. The other, Vida, is still undergoing observation and continues to make progress. You'll remember that the animals bolted when they were spooked by builders moving rubble. So a positive update there from the Army on those runaway horses. Coming up on the UK Tonight, I'll be speaking to the 76-year-old who has just become the oldest Brit to complete one of the world's most gruelling feats of endurance. And in the sport, Binny Villapola's take after being arrested in a Spanish nightclub. That's on the way.
So it started in 2014, where we saw a documentary where the police were being literally harpooned by the press over not reducing the number of knife incidents or crimes on the London streets. It was all about London then. So we stepped forward and we said to the Home Office, you know, could you support us in building a national monument against violence that would be the UK's visual symbol against our intolerance to violence? So they agreed. We wrote to all the chief constables. We had donations from all the British constabularies, all 43 of them. And we built this national monument against violence. We're metal workers here. We're not from the establishment or from the infrastructure of the UK. We're just simply metal workers stepping forward to try and do something for the UK. The backing always comes through the parents. It does not generally always come through the regular sources that you'd imagine, like the politicians. The Angel has successfully travelled to 50, I think nearly 50 cities and towns. During that time, over those 10 years, there's been a lot of political awareness that we've gained in that generally there are cities and towns that will prevent the Angel from visiting them. If they feel that the public or the parents are accepting of their circumstances or they want to brush it under the rug, they will genuinely just prevent the angel and its educational programme travelling to their city. We specialise in making art or sculpture out of scrap or waste product. So when we had the first delivery of blades come in, which was actually from our own constabulary from West Mercia, we were expecting a bin or some plastic trays or something that would contain the blades, but no, we received our first delivery in a builder's skip, and 20 or 30% of those blades that arrived were in biohazard tubes, and they were all infected with blood, so they all needed sterilising, and that was really totally out of our comfort zone.
Hello, welcome back. Coming up, the oldest Brit to ever complete the gruelling Marathon des Sables. But first, Adam is here with the sport. And we're going to talk about the England number 8, Billy Vunipola. He got himself into a spot of bother in Mallorca. He's called it an unfortunate misunderstanding. What do we know about what happened?
Yeah, big player, 75 caps, big in stature as well. He's a forward.
Every sense of the word, yeah.
Arrested, charged and fined €240. The incident took place the early hours of Sunday morning out in Mallorca. The pictures aren't great. They show Vunipola topless, laughing, and he had to be, according to reports locally, tasered twice before being detained. And this was time off from Saracens. So, yeah, it's not a good look in any way, shape or form for Billy Vunipola.
No, well, we understand he's come back to the UK after that incident. What impact is that going to have on him, club and country-wise?
Well, I mean, you mentioned the fact that, you know, he said that it's an unfortunate incident which got out of hand. He said that there was no violence, no fight, no threats. Obviously, the Spanish police saw something in it. Saracens are investigating it. The RFU are looking into it as well. He's unlikely to play for England again because he's due to move to France. We've seen what happened with Owen Farrell, etc., etc. So, yeah, it's not a good look at the time when Saracens are challenging for a title. But let's forget about that for the time being and concentrate on the other sport, shall we?
This Sky News Sports Bulletin is brought to you by Vitality. Getting more people more active. Live life with Vitality.
The big reveal. In Paris, unveiling Olympic and Paralympic kits. This, the look for Team GB. Back to basics. Classic red, white and blue. Style simplicity from Adidas.
I've been in the process of getting ready for Paris for years, and then all of a sudden it becomes real and it's all coming to life. So yeah, it's very exciting to get in the kit, and it just makes me feel very proud and think I really want to make sure that I get here.
This, a traditional look to Team GB, at a time when variations on flag designs by sports teams has stoked heated debates.
Team GB hope this kit will put the traditionalist minds at rest with a very patriotic design and no tinkering at all with the Union Jack. There it is in red, white and blue.
For athletes, it's the technical specifications that matter most to maximise performance.
I was actually consulted in the design process for the Paralympic side of things as well, and we thought about access features, and the team thought...
This Sky News Sports Bulletin is brought to you by Vitality.
Now, we always like to leave you with something weird or wonderful here on the UK Tonight. And a 76-year-old from Berkshire has become the oldest Brit to ever complete one of the world's toughest ultra marathons. Harry Hunter ran the Marathon des Sables to raise money for the Alexander Devine Children's Hospice Service. The 7-day race takes place in the Sahara Desert and it covers 155 miles. That's bad enough, but the temperatures hit more than 50 degrees. It is quite the challenge. I'm very glad to say that Harry joins me now. Well rested, I hope, Harry.
Yes, I'm getting there. I've been home a week now. I got back last Monday.
Well, having been through all that, I wouldn't have blamed you if it had taken you more than a week to recover, but you actually did this on your 76th birthday. So talk me through how the day of celebrations panned out.
Well, on the actual day, which was on the 15th of April, the second day of the race, And they gather us at the start, about 30 minutes before the start, and they go through all the briefings and everything. And then all of a sudden, you know, there's music playing. And then they said, right, and today we have a birthday, and he's the oldest man in the race, and 76. And I had over 800 people singing happy birthday to me, which was amazing, amazing.
And that's probably the noisiest it got, because just looking at these pictures here, even though there are quite a few of you taking part, it can be quite isolating with serious temperatures and sort of geographical factors to overcome.
Oh, yes, yeah. I mean, it's a race, or it's a thing which you are on your own quite a bit. And also, I mean, you've really got to focus, and it's all mental strength to get through it. You know, you've got to keep battling on. I mean, the terrain, the heat, the distance, everything, it all throws at you, and you just got to keep pushing on.
I understand the hardest bit actually happened while you're asleep. There was a sandstorm?
Yes, because there was a lot of bivouacs, because, you know, there's over 800 people. And me and my tent mates, there were 7 of us in the tent, and the tent collapsed, the only one that did, on top of us while we were asleep. And of course, it's 1:30 in the morning, and you couldn't put the tent back up. So we basically just shuffled ourselves underneath it, wrapped our heads up so the sand wasn't getting in, and just went to sleep again.
Yeah, I would imagine you were desperate for sleep at that point. So what's the challenge for your 77th birthday?
Well, I have got one for next year, which a couple of guys that were in my tent, they're doing this charity thing in Nicaragua, and to ascend the 7 tall
Harry,
volcanoes.
it's called the Line of Fire. Good luck with it. We'll talk to you after that.